What if I told you a man who fought for his country was punished for mourning on his own soil? Asterisk, it was a rainy Tuesday morning in a small Georgia town when Marcus Taylor, a 38-year-old decorated Marine veteran, stood silently outside a courthouse. He wasn't protesting. He wasn't causing a scene. He was simply holding a photo of his younger brother Jamal, who had died just 3 days prior in a wrongful police shooting. Marcus had flown home early from a veteran's mental health retreat to be with his family. But grief has its own timing, and Marcus needed a moment alone. Asterisk, he wore his dress blues, polished boots, and ribbons of honor across his chest. But none of that mattered when 2 officers spotted him standing too still, too long. They walked over, eyes suspicious. "No, hello. No, can we help you?" "Just suspicion," Marcus politely explained, voice steady but hollow. "My brother's hearing was supposed to be today. He's gone." "I needed to be here," asterisk, but the officers were already tense. One placed his hand on his belt. The other asked for ID. Marcus offered it. They asked why he was loitering. He repeated, "I'm just grieving." Asterisk, but to them, he wasn't a grieving veteran. He was a black man standing still in a place they didn't think he belonged. When he gently refused to move along, reminding them this was public ground, one officer pulled his taser. Asterisk, "Sir, I serve this country." Zap. Marcus hit the pavement. A witness screamed, and someone, in a panicked voice, dialed a number. Marcus once memorized in boot camp. It was a call that would wake the storm, because 8 minutes later, the Marines arrived. Asterisk, the moment Marcus's body hit the concrete, a silence swallowed the courthouse steps. His photo of Jamal, his little brother, fluttered to the wet ground, the frame cracking upon impact. His body twitched, arms instinctively curling in as the electricity from the taser pulsed through him. Rain mixed with the blood now dripping from the back of his head. Asterisk, the officers didn't even flinch. One leaned down, cuffing Marcus with a mechanical coldness, as if he were picking up trash. The other stood, scanning for witnesses, eyes darting with mild annoyance more than concern. Asterisk, they didn't know who they'd just dropped. Asterisk, they didn't know who was watching. Asterisk, across the street, in a parked car, sat Sergeant David Doc Morales, a retired Marine medic and one of Marcus's closest brothers-in-arms. He had promised Marcus he'd be there that morning, even just to sit in the car and wait. Marcus wanted space, and Morales understood. Marines respect silence when it carries pain. Asterisk, but now, Morales was out of the car before the taser click stopped. Echoing. Asterisk, he ran across traffic, hand instinctively going to the spot on his hip where a sidearm used to rest. He was unarmed now, but his voice was sharp, trained, commanding. Asterisk, what the hell are you doing? That's Staff Sergeant Marcus Taylor. You just tased a Bronze Star recipient. Asterisk, the officers turned, startled. One placed his hand on his taser. Again. Asterisk, back up, sir. This is none of your concern. Asterisk, the hell it isn't, Morales barked. He knelt beside Marcus, checking his pulse, feeling for the signs of a seizure. You idiots just tased a combat veteran. He's got a traumatic brain injury. You just triggered it. Do you know what you've done? Asterisk, one officer shrugged. He resisted orders. Asterisk, Morales looked up, eyes blazing. He was grieving. Asterisk, by now, a small crowd had gathered. Cell phones were out. Someone yelled, "He's a vet, man." He didn't do nothing. Asterisk, Morales didn't wait. He pulled out his phone, not to film, but to call. Asterisk, it was a number only a few men in the country had the right to use. A direct line to the 9th Marine Expeditionary Command Liaison Office, a line reserved for family emergencies, funeral honors, and military injustice. Asterisk, Morales spoke in a low, tight voice. Asterisk, this is Sergeant David Morales, retired. Badge 1,170,509. I'm requesting immediate activation of the Honors Protocol response. We have a downed veteran Staff Sergeant Marcus Taylor civilian assault by law enforcement. Location: Fulton County Courthouse, Georgia. He's been tased. He's not moving. Asterisk, pause. The line crackled. Then the voice on the other end said only one thing. Understood. 8 minutes. Asterisk, Morales hung up. He gently touched Marcus's shoulder, whispering, Hang in there, brother. Help's coming. Asterisk, the officers looked confused now. What the hell was that? One asked, asterisk, but Morales didn't answer. Instead, he looked up and locked eyes with the nearest camera. His voice carried like thunder. Asterisk, you boys just lit a fire you can't put out. Exactly 6 minutes and 43 seconds later, the air changed. Asterisk, you could feel it before you saw it. The hum of engines, low and deliberate, rolled down the street like the approach of a storm. People turned, trying to understand why traffic had suddenly halted, why the streetlights blinked out of rhythm. Then they came. A blacked-out SUV screeched around the corner, followed by 2 matte gray Humvees bearing no civilian plates, just the Eagle, Globe, and Anchor insignia of the United States Marine Corps. Doors flew open. 4 men in full Marine dress blues stepped out, not guards, not police. These were officers, leaders, each one with more medals than the courthouse wall could hold. Asterisk, behind them came medics, military, not civilian. Their gear was clean, efficient, silent. No one questioned them. One barked, "Clear the scene." Asterisk, people moved without thinking. The 2 officers who had tased Marcus stepped back, unsure if they should talk or run. Asterisk, the tallest Marine Colonel Isaiah Ford, a man whose reputation for discipline was matched only by his intolerance for injustice, walked up to Morales and saluted. Asterisk, Sergeant Morales, report. Asterisk, Morales returned the salute, voice steady. Civilian officers used a stun weapon on Staff Sergeant Taylor while he was grieving on federal steps. No resistance, no crime, just presence. Asterisk, Colonel Ford nodded once. Then he turned to the officers. Asterisk, which of you discharged the taser? One lifted his hand. Ford stepped forward until they were eye to eye. Asterisk, you assaulted a Marine under the federal protection of the Honorably Discharged Veterans Act. You're now under internal military investigation. You'll place your weapons on the ground and wait for instructions. Asterisk, the officer scoffed. You have no jurisdiction. Asterisk, you're standing on federal grounds. Ford cut in, sharp as a blade. And that Marine lying on the pavement? He earned this soil more than you'll ever understand. Asterisk, at that moment, Marcus groaned. He stirred. Asterisk, a medic knelt beside him, whispering, You're safe now, Staff Sergeant. Your brothers are here. Asterisk, and as the cameras kept rolling, and the world began to ask why a black war hero had to bleed for mourning his brother. Asterisk, the Marines made it clear this would not be buried. Asterisk, the courthouse plaza, once silent and gray, had erupted into tension. Asterisk, Marcus lay twitching on the wet pavement, his eyes fluttering between rage and confusion, pain and disbelief. The taser had knocked the wind out of him, but not the fight. The police officer, still gripping the device, moved in to cuff him. Asterisk, that's when a voice broke through the crowd, sharp, commanding, unmistakable. Asterisk, that man is a Marine. Stand down. Asterisk, the voice belonged to Gunnery Sergeant Evelyn Brooks, a woman whose presence hit like thunder. She was still in uniform, boots stomping toward the chaos, her posture rigid and lethal. Flanking her were 5 other Marines, all of them recently discharged, now working in private security. But none of them had forgotten the code no one gets. Left behind, the officers hesitated only for a second, but it was enough. Evelyn knelt beside Marcus, placing her hand on his chest. Marcus, it's me, Gunny Brooks, you're okay. Asterisk, Marcus blinked slowly, recognizing the voice. She'd been his squad leader in Fallujah. Asterisk, the younger officer stepped forward, confused and frustrated. This doesn't concern you. We had to subdue him, he was resisting. Asterisk, Evelyn rose slowly, face blank, voice deadly calm. Resisting grief? Asterisk, her team spread out behind her like a shield. The tallest Marine, a hulking Samoan named Keone, you tased a war hero. For standing still. Asterisk, cameras were recording now. Civilians watching. Whispers growing. Asterisk, Evelyn held up Marcus's ID. You see these stripes? These mean something. He served with honor. And if you can't respect that, then maybe it's you who needs to be removed. The officers were no longer in control. The Marines had arrived, and they weren't leaving without justice. Asterisk the moment Staff Sergeant Ramirez stepped forward, the tension snapped like a brittle wire. His boots echoed against the concrete as he passed the stunned officers. Behind him stood 4 more Marines in dress uniform men who had once fought alongside Marcus in the sands of Fallujah and the mountains of Afghanistan. But today, they were here for something even more sacred than war. Brotherhood. Asterisk. Where's Marcus Taylor? Ramirez barked, scanning the small crowd now gathering. His voice was sharp, the kind of command that made civilians straighten involuntarily. Asterisk. The EMTs hesitated, then gestured toward the ambulance where Marcus lay still breathing, but dazed and bruised. Ramirez's face darkened. Asterisk. You tased a man in uniform? He asked, turning to the officers. A decorated veteran? For standing in silence. That man earned our flag with his blood. You don't touch him. Asterisk. Officer Granger tried to justify. He was non-compliant, sir. We didn't know. Officer Granger tried to justify. He was non-compliant, sir. We didn't know who he was. Asterisk. You didn't need to know, Ramirez snapped. All you had to do was look. That man has more medals than both of you combined. He didn't come here to start trouble. He came to bury his brother. Asterisk. Then, without waiting for permission, Ramirez marched into the ambulance. Marcus blinked slowly, dazed but conscious. When he saw Ramirez, tears filled his eyes not from pain, but from the overwhelming relief of being seen. Asterisk. I couldn't save him, Marcus whispered. Voice cracked. Ramirez knelt beside him and placed a firm hand on his shoulder. You saved more men than you'll ever know. You did your duty. Let us do ours now. Asterisk. And outside, the Marines formed a silent wall between Marcus and the police. No guns. No violence. Asterisk. Just unshakable loyalty. And the unmistakable look of men who were ready to defend their brother once more. The courthouse lobby had turned into a silent war zone. As Marcus lay restrained and bruised, Gunnery Sergeant Elena Ramirez crouched beside him, eyes burning with rage, but her hands calm and steady. She checked his pulse, whispered his name. He blinked slowly, trying to speak. Asterisk. Stay with me, Marine, she said, voice low and commanding. Your fight isn't over. Asterisk. The officers had stepped back, their tasers now holstered. But the damage was done, and the Marines weren't here for apologies. Asterisk. Lieutenant Colonel John Matthews, Marcus's former commanding officer, stood face to face with the police chief, who had just arrived. Explain to me, Matthews growled, how a decorated veteran ends up on the concrete for grieving his brother. Asterisk. The chief stuttered something about miscommunication and unusual behavior. But Gunnery Sergeant Ramirez wasn't buying it. She stood and lifted Marcus's ID card from the ground. This man earned a Silver Star in Fallujah. He saved 12 of our brothers from a burning convoy under Taliban fire. And you tased him for standing still. Asterisk. One of the officers, clearly shaken, muttered, We didn't know who he was. Asterisk. Matthews thundered, You didn't care who he was. Asterisk. The media had arrived now, cameras catching every word, every glance. A young journalist whispered, He was tased while in uniform. Asterisk. Ramirez turned toward the cameras. He wore the flag on his shoulder. That should have been enough. Asterisk. And then, like a final blow, she knelt beside Marcus, took his hand, and saluted him. The crowd watched in stunned silence, because it wasn't just about Marcus anymore. It was about every black man whose service didn't shield him from suspicion. Every veteran whose honor was erased by fear. Asterisk. And the Marines? They weren't leaving quietly. Asterisk. The courtroom was never meant for this kind of justice. Asterisk. Marcus had been lifted from the pavement, his uniform scraped, dignity bruised, but his spine unbroken. He sat upright, now flanked by Marines in formation. A wall of olive and steel behind him. The courthouse lobby had become sacred ground. And this time, Marcus wasn't alone. Asterisk. The officers who tased him were ordered to stand before the police chief, the mayor, and a roaring crowd. No riot, no chaos. Just something more dangerous to injustice. Organized outrage. Asterisk. Lieutenant Colonel Matthews stepped forward. Asterisk. You see these men and women behind me? He said to the gathering press. They bled in sandstorms, carried brothers through enemy fire, and saluted folded flags of friends who never came home. Marcus Taylor did all of that and more. Asterisk, he turned to the mayor. And you let your officers put him in handcuffs while he mourned his brother, in full dress uniform. Asterisk, the mayor stammered. This was a misunderstanding. There will be a formal investigation. Asterisk, a misunderstanding doesn't involve 50,000 volts to the chest. Gunnery Sergeant Ramirez snapped. That's a message, one we've heard too many times. Then a new voice broke through. Mrs. Eleanor Taylor, Marcus's mother, walked into the chamber holding a photograph of her sons, one in a Marine uniform, the other in a casket. Her steps were slow. Her face was strength carved from pain. Asterisk, she walked up to the podium and said only this. Asterisk, my son fought for a country that still doesn't recognize his skin beneath the medals. But don't you dare think we'll stay silent. We raised a soldier, you awakened a battalion. Asterisk, silence fell like thunder. What happened in that courthouse didn't stay local. By morning, footage of Marcus being tased in uniform had gone viral. National networks played it on a loop. Hashtags exploded. Veterans of all colors stood in solidarity. Hashtag Salute Marcus trended for days. Civil rights groups called it the perfect storm of racism and disregard for service. Asterisk, within 24 hours, the officers were suspended. Within 48, the mayor had called for their termination. But the Marines? They weren't done. Asterisk, the Marine Corps issued a public statement. We do not forget our own. We do not tolerate dishonor. Not from foreign enemies, and not from domestic injustice. A congressional hearing was scheduled. Marcus, still recovering, gave his testimony via livestream. He wore his full dress blues again, despite the taser burns across his chest. His voice cracked only once when he said his brother's name. Asterisk, Jamal never made it to his court date, he said. Because someone saw his skin before his story. And then I stood where he never got to, and I was reminded that no matter how many wars I fight, I'm still fighting one here. Asterisk, millions watched. Millions wept. Asterisk, and when the hearing closed, and the world seemed to spin a little slower, something beautiful happened. Asterisk, outside the Capitol, hundreds of Marines stood in silent formation. Black, white, brown, male, female, some in wheelchairs, some with prosthetics, all standing for one. Asterisk, a boy approached Marcus, holding a crayon drawing of him in uniform, cape flowing behind him like a superhero. Asterisk, you're what a real hero looks like, he said. Asterisk, Marcus knelt, smiling through pain. No, son, a real hero is anyone who stands, even when the world tells him to kneel. The nation stood with him, and this time they didn't look away.